Hello, Glue Troopers, and welcome back to the Tarbis. Hope you liked that new beginning I was playing with. Well, I got to work on the engines today for the felixstowe, and they were every bit as complicated as I expected, but the parts do fit well. The only thing I'll warn you is when you put the cylinders, when you put the halves together, they're in banks of 6 each, and I was very careful to make sure I had the right parts, but they didn't fit very well. They fit fine. A couple of them just went right into place, but a couple of them, there were like little nibs of plastic I had to trim off that looked like guide pins, and I was like, am I sure I got the right ones? But I verified all the numbers, so once I clipped those off, they fit together. All the parts fit beautifully. Of course, we're talking about extremely tight tolerances, and some of the parts are so tiny. For example, it gives you the choice between 2 different magneto systems, and the Watford magnetos have all these extra components that go on them, and you can see in these photographs just how tiny they are. But they fit like a glove. I mean, once you get them sanded down and everything to make sure there's no flash on them, or not flash, but when you snip it, make sure that there's where the sprue cutter cuts it off, that you've got that completely trimmed off, because there's no spare room on these tiny parts, but they go in without any argument, fit like a glove. Amazing at the quality of this thing, but still, there's going to be a little bit of fitting required. It's just the nature, but that's the nature of building models, right? Because we were busy all day today, I didn't get started till this afternoon, so I did not get the engines finished. And I elected not to pre-paint the parts because they're so small. I figure with the paint and with my big hands, I just wind up getting glue on things and smearing the paint. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint it after it's done best I can. That I would probably recommend, though, that you probably could, especially if you're using some of the better, like Tamiya thin quick dry cements, you might be better off to pre-paint things, because they actually do fit into place pretty well, and then you can drop the thin cement in and let it harden. And it's, of course, when you have the paint on there, sometimes it takes longer for it to harden, but still, either way, the detail level on these engines is just about insane, and it's just magnificent. It's a beautiful thing to look at. And this airplane does not have cowlings over the engine, so a lot of the detail of these engines will be visible, which really makes you want to, of course, you always want to do a good job, but on the kind of the opposite of the insides, which you can't really see much of, even though you know all that detail's in there, a lot of that detail is going to show. Yes. So that's where we are on that. We were very busy today. We did decide wife and I decided to go look at a couple of convertibles. Unfortunately, the Buick Casada that we went to look at, or Cascada, however you say that, it's a Spanish word for a cascade, like a waterfall. It's sort of really, what I could tell, the only American convertible luxury car still made. And we found one dealer that had one on the lot, and we went there and we drove around the lot with him, and we couldn't find it. I don't think it was out on a test drive, but you know, it happens. But we were just looking to see how comfortable it would be. It's where really we are all at that right now. So I will have a convertible someday. But both our cars are doing okay right now. So don't know if I'm going to get anything out in the morning like today, things to do in the morning. So if I don't, I don't. If I do, yay. The next step, once I get these engines finished, which I'll hopefully do tomorrow, get them painted, then fit them to the center section. They sit up on poles and with the centerpiece of the wing, And then I'm going to start working with some of these turnbuckles. My wife did have a very thin pin vise needle because she uses them on her dolls. So I might be able to get those a couple of those gas patch turnbuckles pre-positioned like we saw in the live stream. And then when I get the wing on and start rigging it, hopefully that will. But I'm also going to try some of these eye pins that Bruce gave me. I won't put them next to each other. I'll like do one in the front and a different one in back. That way keep some symmetry going. But I'm really looking forward to doing that. And one thing I also realized, now of course, you take the pin vise, drill a hole, and the stem on the gas patch turnbuckle will fit in there, and I CA glue it in there and bend it to shape. But you could also, for ones like here on the tail that I already have the line attached, you could just glue a gas patch turnbuckle on top of it just to add a little detail. Any paint would probably kind of blot it out a little bit, but it would give it that little dimensional shift that looks better than just having a piece of tape. But we'll see. And I might go ahead and get some 1/32 scale ones for the wings or something, just to see how they look. And I still haven't been able to thread a needle through these 1/48 scale ones, but that's me. Big hands, old eyes. Well, that's pretty much all I have for today, guys. Hope this day finds you well. And I did have some folks ask me some questions about molds. Recently I've been getting some questions about what happens to old molds and things like that. And we talked about it before, but generally speaking, the old molds never die. They just get repopped by somebody else. That's why when you find some of these companies that repop old kits and you get a lot of flash, you realize, yeah, that's an old worn out mold. It's rare that molds are actually destroyed, although it does happen. And believe it or not, molds need maintenance. I'm not exactly sure how you, other than cleaning them, but once they wear down, I don't think steel can be built back up like that. But the old beryllium copper ones, most people won't touch those things now because we found out it's a dangerous material to handle. So a lot of the old molds are still around and still being used, but given the overall advances in mold making technology, I think we're going to start seeing, and we are seeing more new molds. Lannis just cut a couple of their own, and when they did the Black Bear, they decided to go ahead and redo the mold. And I think they made a new mold for the Blackbeard some years ago, and it's an expensive proposition, but they have nicer kits as a result of it. So, but there are still plenty of 50 and 60-year-old molds out there. In fact, that stagecoach that I built, the big one from Lindbergh, that was originally done by Marx in 1955. And what I find interesting is it's still an incredibly crisp and accurate mold. Even in the 50s, they could make molds extremely accurate if they wanted to, even though it was all made by hand. Of course, now I use computers, which is why companies like Wingnut Wings can put out this insane level of detail. But the detail on the stagecoach that I made would be hard to be surpassed today. And Marx, of course, primarily made toys, not models, so they had a lot of experience at mold making, and they had experts at it. So really, a lot of the molds that we built as kids in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the level of detail was based on how much the company was willing to spend. Companies like Monogram prided themselves on very accurate models. They didn't put a lot of interior detail initially because they didn't think it was necessary. I'm inclined to agree, at least at that point in history. But they made it as good as it needed to be, and quality was their guiding star. And other companies just wanted to get it out quick and keep the cost down. So that's the molds. Yes, it is true. The molds we're making today, and they're cutting with lasers or CNC machines and everything else, are easier and cheaper to make. They're made out of safer materials, and they can make better models. But you look at some of the kits from the 60s and 70s, and they hold up pretty well today. So it really was as much as you wanted to put into it. And of course, back then it was every little bit of detail cost a lot more money. And as Nick Argento had told me from Glencoe, that in the, I think it was the 60s, there were like 1,500 companies what were called tool and die companies that could cut and make molds. Very few of them dealt in kit models, but they could, because they could make anything from, you know, bottle caps and laundry machine knobs and just whatever had to be made out of, had to be injection molded. They could make anything. It was just how much detail do you want? And now there's like less than 50 in the entire country, or maybe it was 150, but that has a lot to do with it. Of course, yes, the techniques have changed and we don't manufacture as much in this country, but one of the things that killed off a lot of the mold making in this country was the death of other industries, like the manufacturing of refrigerators and cars and things that used a lot of those materials. As that stuff started moving overseas, the injection molding started moving overseas, and the talent base withered away. And not entirely, but of course times change, but it's only a fraction today of what it used to be, and it's part of the overall outsourcing of our industry across the globe in general. So other, you know, where we dropped off, other countries picked up. Whereas on the other hand, countries like Japan, you know, they kept it in-house, they kept it on the island, and which is why companies like Hasegawa, Aoshima, and Tamiya are still going gangbusters. So, that's part of the reason. You know, they also keep a keen eye on making what people want, what sells, and keeping the quality up there. Of course, price goes with it, but they never did. A lot of the Japanese companies like them never really did worry about keeping it cheap. Their attitude is, we make what we make, and our client base is the people who are willing to pay for it, and there you go. So that be that, this be this, and that is all. And that's the way it is. April 28th, 2021. I'm Max of Max's Models. What does Walter Cronkite used to say? And that's the way it is. And that's the way it is. Say April 28th. And that's the way it is. April 28th, 2021. I'm Max of Max's Models. Have a good night. And that's the way it is. April 28th, 2021. I'm Max of Max's Models. Model on.